Advocate Malesela Teffo says some of the harassment that he's been receiving actually comes in some way from the presidency. And this is after he withdrew as counsel for accused number 1 to 4 in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial. In a statement, though, the presidency labeled Teffo's allegations as baseless and mischievous. In fact, President Cyril Ramaphosa spokesperson Vincent Magwenya joins us now in our studio to try and, I guess, clarify what's been said and the decisions from the presidency. It's lovely to have you with us, by the way. Thank you so much for popping by. You know, one thing that came up for me, the president has allegations leveled against him all the time by all manner of people. And I'm sure you'll agree that it's almost untenable to respond to everyone who has something to say about the president. The question becomes then, what was it about these particular claims that the presidency thought warranted a response?
Well, Advocate Teffo is an officer of the court. We would have expected that someone who, like him, who is in the legal profession, will appreciate the level of veracity that is required to support such claims, number one. Number two, that trial is a massive platform. It has a huge following. It will have been irresponsible of us not to clarify these matters when a baseless claim is made in a platform of that nature. This is a matter that has been going on for some time in terms of the trial. A lot of people feel that it's a matter that should have been addressed a long time ago in terms of bringing it into the courts. So to have it abused in that fashion and to have the standing of the office of the president being maligned in that manner was something that we had to tackle head on, and also not allow the peddling of false information to go unchallenged.
I might have missed it, but what I saw was him actually making the allegations after his time in court. In fact, he was outside, there was an impromptu briefing with some reporters, and that's when the remarks were made. In other words, this wasn't formally said in court, as it were.
No, let me correct that. I actually saw the clip. He was in court.
Okay, so there was a time in court where he made those
It was a time in court, and when he was justifying or building up to his withdrawal from the trial, he made this claim.
Fair enough. Okay.
So that's what concerns us.
What he's also said, because he didn't stop there, is he wants the president to speak to him personally. Now, I wonder, in the interest of collegiality, whether that's a request the president is willing to entertain.
No. I mean, he could have raised the matter to the president or his office before making it public. That would have been a more appropriate approach. Instead, he just went public in court with a claim that up until now he has not substantiated. So I don't see why the president will invest his time to speak to him when he could have addressed the matter with any of the officials in the president's office. And in that case, then the matter will have been addressed. So there's a bit of a gimmick in it. There's a bit of an element of attention-seeking, because he knows the moment you mention the name of the president, it will make headlines, and he will trend. And that's something that we're not going to entertain at the expense of the image of the president and the standing of that office.
If that's your reading of the situation, why even bother sending out a statement replying to it? It almost feels like it's actually the response, ironically, that might give more wind to what he said.
No, you will notice that we responded almost a day after he made those claims. And those claims were running as major headlines in most news outlets and platforms. So if we left it unchallenged, to some, it would have been a fact. Even though to some and more discerning, it will have been something that people placed doubt into. But considering the platform, considering that he's an officer of the court, and generally just considering the environment that we're in, the unfortunate nature of how wrong information rapidly flows, we couldn't let it go.
There are several things to consider, I imagine, of course, before you think about what to respond to. I don't need to tell you that as a communicator, of course. I do wonder, though, whether, the cynics, for instance, might be wondering why Teffo would make an allegation like this to begin with, given what kind of reaction it's likely to elicit? I'm sure those were part of your reflections too.
I suppose he will be best placed as to his motives for making such allegations, having not approached mechanisms that will have assisted him in that regard. So he must explain himself. He must bring forward the proof. He must substantiate the claims that he's made. The burden is on him. It's not on us. It's not on the president's office. It is on him to provide evidence to his claims.
Right. There's also, I guess, been a lot of conversation around the handling of the Palapala scandal, I think it's safe to say. Initially, there was actually criticism against the president not saying enough about what actually happened there. Have lessons been learned? In fact, let me ask the question this way. Do you regret how you responded to that so far?
So here's what's happening with respect to that matter. The investigation is underway. The investigation is proceeding with the support and full cooperation of the president. Therefore, all issues related are being ventilated and addressed and dealt with through a legally constituted forum, if you like. And that, we think, remains an appropriate decision, rather than engaging in a public mudslinging and on a back and forth with Mr. Fraser and counter-arguments. Let's rather allow the legal due process to take its course. We hope that investigation will be wrapped up as soon as possible so that we can just move on from this issue. The president remains quite focused on his work, and he is consistent with respect to he will not shy away from accountability. He will not interfere with any investigation.
Does he feel pressurized?
Well, the job in general is a pressurized job.
Well, by this particular scandal.
Just being a president, not necessarily. Issues of the economy are more pressure issues. Issues of energy are more pressure issues. Ensuring that the capacity of the state is rebuilt and that the government can deliver to its commitments, those are pressure issues.
Right.
This issue will be dealt with in due course through legal processes.
And to be clear, you are satisfied with the way in which you've responded to it so far as the presidency?
Yeah, so far we're satisfied.
All right.
Yes.
Another statement you released, I think it was also yesterday, was around this Section 194 committee that's looking into Busisiwe Mkhwebane's fitness to hold office. We know the UDM leader had proposed that President Cyril Ramaphosa should perhaps also have his time in front of the inquiry. The presidency essentially saying that the president doesn't feel that's necessary, cautioning against the abuse of the inquiry itself. If, however, Ramaphosa were to be summoned, because we know the chair has those powers, is he willing to obey that?
Let's just go back a bit and understand and maybe deal with the reasoning behind General Olomisa's suggestion. And say categorically the suggestion is false, number one. Number two, the reason it's false is because that process was initiated by Parliament. It can only be initiated by the National Assembly, by the way, not by the President. The President is constitutionally obliged to respond and effect the necessary processes, in this case, the suspension.
Right.
Once the National Assembly triggered the entire process to say they will investigate grounds of misconduct and incompetence of Advocate Mkhwebane. Thirdly, General Olomisa raises the issue of CR17 campaign funds, and he says public funds may have been used. That was never an allegation, by the way. The Concord issued a judgment on the matter to the extent that even the public protector had no authority in investigating that matter because the campaign itself, the CR17 campaign, was not a public entity and there were no allegations of public funds having been used. But now, what General Olomisa is attempting to do in abusing this inquiry is through the Parliament back door revise or question a judgment of the Constitutional Court, which quite frankly is a violation of the separation of powers principle.
Okay. The question I'm asking, though, having considered what you said, is if in its own wisdom the inquiry finds that there are grounds for the president to appear before it and the chair even uses his summons, Will the president comply with them?
What will inform those grounds? What will be those grounds?
Well, I mean, for whatever reason, I mean, this is an unprecedented process, and in many ways, Parliament is also learning along the way who the stakeholders may be and which voices they need to hear from. You know, to presuppose that the inquiry at this stage knows, as a matter of fact, who they want to hear from in its entirety is also not true. So if there is a scenario, a moment, where through summons or whatever, perhaps it doesn't even need to get there, if the inquiry were to call on the president, is he willing to appear before it? We
will deal with that scenario when it occurs. As things stand, there's no reason for the president to appear before that inquiry. He did not make any allegations against Advocate Mkhwebane. He does not need to prove or disprove any of the allegations that Advocate Mkhwebane is facing in that inquiry.
Let's move away from what General Holomisa has said. In any other scenario, why would the president not want to appear before that inquiry? Well,
we will look at the advice that the committee provides to the president as its reasoning for seeking his appearance to that inquiry. As things stand, it's all speculation, right? So we don't know what grounds they will advance to justify the president's appearance. Our stance remains the same, that the president does not need to appear in that inquiry. It's not a process that he triggered. He is not party to leveling any allegations against Advocate Mkhwebane. Therefore, we will be surprised if the committee will seek the president's appearance. But having said that, we will look at that if it does happen, we will look at it and engage it appropriately.
Vincent Magwenya, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Thanks very much for coming in. Vincent, of course, is the spokesperson for the presidency on a wide range of issues around Cyril Ramaphosa, more specifically his office.